It's Radio Free 501c, the podcast of Road Tulips Consulting. We're here with Season 7. So glad you're joining us. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp, CAEACNP, and I'm so glad you're here for this exciting year of so many great topics, so don't forget to subscribe. It's May, and that means we're celebrating AANHPI month here at Radio Free 501c. We have two more first-time guests for 2025, Nou Vang and KaYing Young, and they're here to talk with us about a special event at the Smithsonian, 50 Years of Southeast Asian American Journeys. It's Monday, April 28, 2025, and it's time for episode 283. Hey everybody, it's Monday, April 28th, and that means it's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c, brought to you by Road Tulips Consulting. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp. Thanks for joining us this week. We're having a wonderful year of first-time guests. We have two more first-time guests this week that I'll introduce in a moment. But first, I'd like to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to our global audience, wherever you may be. And just a reminder, if you haven't followed us or subscribed yet on your favorite service, please take a moment and do that so you don't miss any of these fun and important conversations we're having this year in 2025. This episode, even though it's the last week of April, is kicking off our celebration and recognition of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Month, which is the entire month of May. And that is when we take time to learn more about the AANHPI community and find out what interesting things are going on in May to celebrate that community. And today we're going to be talking about 50 years of Southeast Asian American journeys, which I'm really looking forward to. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce my guests, Nou Vang and KaYing Young, who are here to talk about this special event. So let's start with KaYing. Welcome to the show. Would you like to say hello to the audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Nyashong, hello, Cecilia. Thank you so much for having us here. My name is KaYing Young, and I'm calling in from St. Paul, Minnesota, home to the second largest Hmong American population in the United States and the largest concentration of Hmong in an urban city on the east side of St. Paul, where I'm calling from, where I live. I'm really eager to talk about our 50th year anniversary in America, but also in our diaspora. And so I'm really pleased to be here and looking forward to the conversation, Cecilia.
Oh, that's great. And welcome. Thanks for joining us. And over to Nou. Would you like to say hello and tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, Cecilia, and hello to all your audience. My name is Nou Vang. I'm joining all of you from Northern Virginia, where I've been living for the past couple of years. I am originally from Wisconsin, have been living there for a really long time since my family we arrived there as refugees in the early 1980s.
Well, that's great. And I am really looking forward to this story because one of the great things to me about being an American is you can choose to be an American. It's not like other countries where you have to be born there. I was born in America, but that's what I love about it is it's made up of so many different people with different experiences. Mm-hmm. And celebrating 50 years of Southeast Asian American journeys, this does kind of hinge, I think, on the end of the Vietnam War, or at least our involvement in the Vietnam War. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I mean, every year we have some sort of commemoration, but this year is especially important. 2025 marks the 50th year since one of the most transformative moments for Southeast Asian Americans in the United States specifically, but since the Vietnam War, Southeast Asians have resettled to France, to Australia, to other European countries, to Canada. And so for us, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of Southeast Asians in the United States. And this follows the end of the Vietnam War in 1975, the Secret War in Laos in May 1975, and the fall of Phnom Penh, Cambodia in 1975. And since then, more than 1 million refugees from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam were displaced, and then were eventually resettled and rebuilding their lives here in the U.S. And this is why it's so important to just take a moment to acknowledge, the resilience of these communities and the community building that they've done over the past 50 years. It's a very important opportunity for young people to reflect, but also for those of us who are a little bit older to also remember all the losses that our families have endured, and also to imagine and to rebuild what the future should look like for the next 50 years for our community as Southeast Asian Americans. That's a nutshell in why we're doing this. I think that it's important to remember for those of us who are Americans but may not know very much about our involvement in Southeast Asia is that during the Vietnam War, the United States did intervene in the war between the North and South Vietnam, and then, of course, involved in other countries, bordering countries like the Secret War, where the United States Central Intelligence Agency recruited many ethnic people from Laos, including Hmong people, which I identify as, and Nu and I are both Hmong Americans, to fight as allies and as foot soldiers for the CIA. We won't have time to go into all the historical details, but that's why it's important for to invite everyone to the May 10th event that's going to happen in Washington, D.C. With the Smithsonian Institute, and specifically at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. And that's what we're trying to promote today.
And thank you. And that's a great segue over to Nou. So Nou, could you tell us a little bit about this event? And KaYing already mentioned it's on May 10th, but could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so this event is being held in partnership with the Smithsonian Asia Pacific American Center, also being organized by myself and KaYing and a number of community members that represent the Hmong Museum, the Laotian American National Alliance, Southeast Asian Freedom Network, and Vietnam Society, just to name a few. The intent of the event is to really not only celebrate this 50th anniversary that KaYing just spoke about, but also to celebrate our heritage and our contributions to the American community and communities that we live in. We have, we've been here for 50 years, and our contributions have been very vast, making the communities that we're part of very vibrant. This event will showcase a couple of films that will really talk about the impact that we as a people have had on the communities that we live, but also showcase, I think, like our growth in having arrived in America as refugees, and now as American citizens, our contributions to those communities.
And I do want to add, because this is being supported by the Smithsonian Institution in partnership with a lot of different people. Nou mentioned the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center is the lead on this, along with the Hmong Museum, Laotian American National Alliance, Red Green Rivers, Southeast Asian Freedom Network, and the Vietnam Society. So all three of those countries are represented to a certain extent in this. And as KaYing mentioned, she and Nou are from the Hmong tribe, which is, you may have seen it in writing HMONG, but the H is silent. So it's the Hmong tribe. Can you tell us a little bit, or I shouldn't say tribe, I'm sorry, let me correct myself, the Hmong people. So KaYing, can you tell us a little bit about the Hmong culture and what sets it apart?
Yeah. So in the United States, we have over 350,000 Hmong in the United States. And the majority of us came to this country as a result of the secret war in Laos. Our diaspora is very expansive. Those of us who are in the United States originated from Laos. It means that we've been living in the country of Laos for maybe 300 years. Prior to that, the Hmong history has said that we migrated from southern China to the countries of Vietnam, Thailand, and Laos. And so in Laos, in China itself, I believe that the population is still 7 million people who identify as Hmong, although not all of them speak the same dialect. There is a lot of diversity within the Hmong community as well too. And so Nou and I are primarily knowledgeable about Hmong in Laos, Thailand, and in the United States. We are an ethnic community in all the countries that I just mentioned. And we have a very distinct oral tradition, and language that is not similar to the countries that we our recent history can be traced to. Like, we don't speak the same language as Lao people or Thai people. We have our own distinct language, culture, and spiritual beliefs. And again, we have a very strong oral tradition. Although in the 1950s, a written language was created by Catholic missionaries and linguists for our community. We also have other written languages that were created by other Hmong leaders as well too, but the Romanized alphabet is the most common one. Uh, as related to the 50th anniversary, in the 1960s and 70s, the Hmong lived in the mountainous regions of Laos and were recruited by the CIA to support them in stopping the spread of communism. And our role very specifically was to interrupt the Ho Chi Minh Trail from the north of Vietnam to the South Vietnam. And it's a history that very few people know about because it was the secret war of Laos until the release of the Information Act, that more and more people who do research will realize that we played a significant role in that secret war. Uh,
Mm.
Sadly, though, because of our role in that secret war, we became refugees and had to flee to seek safety and haven in other parts of Southeast Asia. And many of us lingered in refugee camps in Thailand. Nu mentioned that she came to this country in 1980s. I came in 1976, so we were part of the earlier resettlement in the United States. And so I'll hand it off to Nu to see if she wants to add anything else.
Yeah, and then I have a follow-up for you as well.
Mhm.
So would you like to add some information to what KaYing just shared?
Yeah, I think everything that KaYing shared is correct. And I would also say part of our cultural vibrancy within all of the Southeast Asian communities in Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam is we all have a very distinct dress. And so you'll see, like today, I'm wearing a sao that is very distinct, particularly to the Hmong community. Our ethnic clothes really help tell our story and the communities that we're from. And the way that we hold our celebrations, our New Year celebrations, as well as some cultural celebrations that each individual community has is really different, but also contributing to the vibrancy of our communities here in the United States.
Well,
And let
and
me just
Nu,
quickly add, Cecilia, but our shared political identity is the Vietnam War and the result of the Vietnam War. And that's why when we celebrate, when we commemorate this event, we're able to come together and work in solidarity because without the intervention of the United States, we would not be in this country together as refugees. And so we do have a political identification that unites all of us here, whether we disagree in philosophy, culture, language, that one is what brought us to the United States.
so the incident that compelled the migration was the Vietnam War. I remember growing up, I'm an avid reader, and I remember reading magazine articles about the Hmong tribe. I'm sorry, Hmong people.
Mhm.
Sorry about that. I keep saying tribe. It's not a tribe, everyone. It is a
Yeah.
group of people from Southeast Asia, the Hmong, moving to the United States and because of the war, and they had helped the United States, and because of that, they had to leave because they were
Yes.
targeted by other people. So some of us are quite aware of it, even though we don't live it the way you did. And Nu, I'd like to throw this question over to you. You migrated here back in 1980, and as KaYing said, she came in 76. So what is that like? And what I mean by this question is, what is that like to go from that country where you grew up and then maybe have to stop somewhere else along the way until you get to the place where you decide to settle, which in this instance is the United States. So what is that like? What does that feel like?
I can say, like, I don't think it was very difficult for us earlier on. So I was actually born in a refugee camp. My parents fled Laos in the late 70s, and they moved into a refugee camp. Ban Vinai is where I was born, and my family lived there for 5 years. And then we came here in 1985. We arrived in the state of Wisconsin in the middle of winter, didn't really know what winter was or what snow was. And we had a very long period of adjustment for our family. My parents had a little bit of education when they were in the refugee camp, however, not enough for them to sustain themselves. And so my family was on public assistance for a long time. We lived in what, in our area, like public housing. And then my parents started to go to the technical college to acquire some kind of a technical job. And that was how like our family got out of poverty, was a result of them pursuing education. But it was difficult because there was no language. I think if you spoke with a lot of refugees who are first generation like I am, they will share with you their story that a lot of them had to serve as interpreters for their families, particularly in communities that were unprepared to provide services for refugees from Southeast Asia. So a lot of us growing up, not only were learning the language, but also learning to navigate, right, this social service system, hospitals, schools for our own family members, and particularly for our parents. I remember having to help my dad with his homework. Like he was he was learning a trade, and he had to calculate like algebra, and he was angry at me because I didn't understand it. But like at the same time, there was a disconnect because he thought because I'm in school, I would have learned that already, not knowing that, in the United States education system, there's like various levels of learning and teaching, and you learn differently in each grade, right? So I think, initially it was very difficult. And I think that that experience is what helped our communities really build the resilience to really unite and say, oh, we're not going through this together. We are, as a community, really trying to support each other and help uplift all of us. KaYing can speak to this a little bit more, but had it not been for the nonprofit support services in our communities, providing kind of ESL classes at night for my parents, job training programs for my parents, transportation to get to and from places, I really don't know where we would be. In the 80s, 90s, and even into the 2000s, a lot of mutual aid associations were set up. Hmong nonprofits were set up to really help bolster and support the communities where our communities were, to really be able to provide those in-language services. And KaYing can talk about this, but it's also the advocacy and support of other communities that really helped us get access to the services that we needed as well.
Well, I'm glad that the social service system worked to a certain extent for you. And I say a certain extent because I don't think it works as well as it could or should, which is another topic for another episode. And I love that you tied that to the nonprofit organizations that could reach out and help you as well, because that is our audience for Radio Free 501c, is nonprofit management people and the people who love them. So KaYing, would you like to add something about that experience? Because for most of us, it's like somebody like myself, I was born here. I was raised here. My family wasn't rich, but, we had a different kind of stability than somebody who has to come here because they need to go somewhere else. They don't really get to choose. So they decide to move here because of the war. So what were some of your experiences when you first got here?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to just address the terminology you're using. I mean, we did not choose to come to the United States either, but we were refugees. And I think that the United States felt obligated to welcome us. And so it wasn't until the 1980s that there was actually congressional action to pass the 1980s Refugee Act. Prior to that, a lot of people came to this country through a migration policy. And until Congress realized how many Southeast Asians were refugees and were seeking safe haven in refugee camps in Thailand. At the height of the 1980s, I think 50,000 people were languishing in the refugee camps. And so I think that the United States government felt a very special obligation because of their own involvement in the Vietnam War to welcome folks. At the beginning, I think they accepted Vietnamese refugees because that was what they saw in the news. The airlift of Vietnamese and American workers from the U.S. Embassy. I mean, I think that made global news, right? And then
Right.
the slow and quiet, refuge from Laos, Laotian and Lao and Hmong refugees. And then let's not forget the bombing of Cambodia did not receive a lot of news either. And then the Khmer Rouge and the killing of millions of people in Cambodia. And then the Cambodians started coming into the refugee camps on the border of Thailand and Cambodia. These are all the things that were happening in Southeast Asia in the 1970s. Um, and so it's really important to say that refugees do not choose to go to these countries or choose to be uprooted. We are forced to leave because of political upheavals, right? And so that's why refugee is a very specific terminology. Um, at the same time, those compassionate Americans in this country became sponsors, and so we do thank all of our sponsors, whether it's families or institutions like Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services, and other voluntary agencies for creating a system to resettle folks like Nou and myself and our families. We were sponsored by the Catholic Charities, and then we came to Columbus, Ohio. But lots of volunteers with the Catholic Charities did welcome us, take us to church basements to get clothes, taught English to my parents. I came when I was only 6 or 7 years old, so both Nou and I were quite young. I consider myself a 1.5 generation, born over there, but grew up in this country. And so this 50th anniversary is especially important. When Nou reminded me that she was born abroad but grew up here, reminding me that the majority of us organizing this event are 1.5 generations. And I think we also feel obligated that the legacies must be passed on to the next generation. That's why the name of the event is Reflection, Resilience, and Reimagine. And it is a moment for us to really honor that movement, both the physical migration movement, but the movement of a people that were uprooted by war and conflict and to rebuild their lives here. And it is rooted in love, struggle, and deep community wisdom. Because oftentimes we say refugees come with nothing, but they do come. They come with a lot of wisdom, whether it's our community that did not have had only an oral tradition, but we have a lot of wisdom through the oral traditions, right? And then, or poets and leaders in the Cambodian community, dancers, right? And or poets and writers and scholars in the Vietnamese American community, including farmers and women and children, right, who survived the war. And that's why I think that this 50th anniversary is our collective way to reflect, to rise and to reimagine what is possible for the next 50 years. And so the theme of reflection, resilience, and reimagine is going to be threaded throughout the event on May 10th, which we invite everyone because the event is free to the public. We of course want a lot of Southeast Asians in the area and across the nation to come if they're in Washington, D.C., but it is open to the public, and we hope that other Americans who want to know or who want to reflect with us would join us on that day. Um, and my last word about how difficult, it was very difficult for my family. My parents did not speak English. I think my dad spoke a little bit of French. Despite having lots of uh, sponsors and institutions that supported us, they only came once in a while. And I have to say that the American community were not prepared to welcome us because they didn't know who Southeast Asians were. There weren't as many Asian grocery stores, so we could not access the food that we're used to. We could not access the kind of weather, the tropical weather that we're used to, right? I mean, winter was very challenging for every family because we are not used to living in this kind of temperature, right? Or weather. And so, despite all of that, we're still here. And I think that's the resilience that we want to share with you.
Yeah, I also want to add a little bit, Cecilia, before you go on to your next question, is I think there's a lot of nuance in our experience, depending on what our parents went through, depending on what country we're from as well. And you'll see that, in the films that we've selected to show, is that the communities, yes, there was one central event that led us to all be refugees and that united us. However, once the United States, our experiences were very different and nuanced. And the films show that really well in terms of how we all kind of adjusted, but also, took on tasks of taking care of each other and taking care of our families.
Well, and I just wanted to mention again, I know a lot of people from Southeast Asia came to the United States, but you had mentioned before that they had gone to other countries as well, like Australia or maybe some parts of Europe. And so when I used the word choose, which you didn't like, and I understand that because nobody chooses to be uprooted by war. But I meant that in the context of maybe you could have gone to a different country, but I know we had a sponsorship program here, not just through the government, but a lot of local places. So no offense was meant by that, because
I get it.
no one chooses to be a refugee, and nobody chooses to get kicked out of their home because of a war that somebody else started. So I just want to clarify that. But you had mentioned some people had gone to different countries other than the United States, and so that's all I was referring to. And I'm assuming they had some sort of sponsorship programs as well, just to be clear on that. And that's how people could maybe go, because I know people sometimes get stuck in refugee camps for years and they don't have an option to go anywhere. And so I think people like myself need to understand that, and understand that you have to find ways to help people get out of the refugee camps so that they can have a different kind of life and move forward in a different way in life. And I just have to say, I cannot imagine what it would be like to come from Southeast Asia and have to go through a Midwest winter without having any idea what that is like. I mean, it's very different. So I get that. So, Nou, I want to throw this one over to you. You both mentioned that there's going to be a series of films and there's going to be conversations and things. Are there any other events going on with the film festival on May 10th, celebrating this anniversary that maybe people should know about?
We have a reception afterwards that's invitation only. In the month of May, there's a number of events that are happening in the DC area. Cecilia, as you mentioned in your opening, there's events happening across the country. Within the Hmong community, we just had the Hmong National Development Conference in the state of Minnesota, where over 1,200 people from the Hmong community convened to really celebrate our history, but our contributions, and really think forward around, what is next for our community and our people. But KaYing, I think you're closer to the community. If there are other notable events that you want to share around what's happening, you can do that.
There are many, and with regards to the films, we have 7 short films and longer versions, but extras from the longer versions that's going to be shown on May 10th. So I do encourage everyone to come, and it's made by different young filmmakers who are Southeast Asian Americans. And again, I want to say that because it's through their lens, it's really moving, and also it really sheds light on both the institutional impact as well as the personal struggles and survival of each of the communities or each of the individuals and communities that they document. I do want to highlight what Nou was saying earlier about the significant role of community leaders and nonprofits that were created by Southeast Asian leaders. When systems failed our community, we then organized our own nonprofit organizations called Mutual Assistance Associations. And they were more than 200 mutual assistance across this country that were led by Cambodian Americans, Vietnamese Americans, Hmong Americans, Montagnards, Mian Americans, and Khmu and other ethnic groups from these 3 countries. And that's the vibrancy of the systems that were created by our community to fill in the gaps when mainstream institutions failed us. And I want to also mention the social the social support that we all receive too. You may wonder, and your listeners may wonder, why Minnesota, why Wisconsin, when we could have gone to Florida, right, or to Texas, where the weather is a bit warmer, in California, where there is a lot of Southeast Asian. And I think partly is because the welcoming community there, the political system that was in place that were welcoming to refugees, that made a huge difference. But also families. Once you have a family member there who then sponsor more people and who said, come here because there's more jobs here, then everybody gravitated to that. And this is so true with the Hmong American community because we are very communal in everything that we do, from funerals to weddings to our social events, that it is based on relationships. And so that's why you see more of us in the Midwest, mainly because we gravitated towards those family members. I mentioned that my family came to Columbus, Ohio, but soon when my dad found out that his nephews were living in Wisconsin, he packed up the car and then suddenly we were moving to Wisconsin. We said bye to our sponsors and we moved to Wisconsin of all places, a very small town next to Lake Michigan, right? So um, I think that the strength of the community is so important, and that's why we wanted to really talk about, how did we help ourselves when the institutions failed us, right? When policies became harmful to refugees and immigrants, not just to us, but to all refugees and immigrants. And that's the kind of resilience that we wanted to discuss, out of the challenge, I think also emerged strength, right? I became a young executive director of a women's organization. It was founded by our elders, women who had a vision for a better society for women and children, and organizations that were predominantly men were not addressing some of the issues that women and elders and children were facing. And these are the kinds of active resistance that was happening. And we want to talk about why that is so important. We want to acknowledge and recognize our own community for their resilience so that we can be here. Nu and I can be here talking to you today.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that. So, Nu, would you like to add anything to what KaYing said or maybe a different comment?
I would just say what KaYing said is it's a lot about in my generation. I know KaYing and I think of myself as a first generation, and KaYing is 1.5, but KaYing's generation really kind of propelled and paved the way for my generation to really be able to grow. As the oldest in my family, I didn't have any mentors. And so it was mentors like KaYing and a lot of mentors among women leaders who are trailblazers that ended up in the DC area that really helped me see, oh, there's a different world out there, and that is really how I ended up in the DC, Virginia area, was because KaYing was in DC and I met KaYing. I'm like, what do you do for a living? Like, how did you end up there? Do you like it? Right. So again, to that point around like community leaders and really being able to give back to your community. Just want to acknowledge like, KaYing had a great role in my generation, us being able to see and pursue that there is a different life that we could be living.
Wow, that's great. Powerful statements from both of you. Thank you. So, as we wrap this up, this episode, as we launch our celebration of AANHPI month, I want to share again this wonderful event that Nou and KaYing are both an important part of. The full title is Reflection, Resilience, Reimagination 50 Years of Southeast Asian American Journeys. Sounds like a great event. So if you can get to that event, May 10th, what is the actual location? We haven't said the actual place where the event is.
Yeah, the location of the event is the Nan Tucker McEvoy Auditorium, which is inside the Smithsonian American Art Museum. That's located at 800 G Street in Washington, D.C.
Great, thank you. And is there a fee for this event?
It's a free event, but we do want people to RSVP because there's limited capacity in the auditorium. So please register on the Eventbrite, and I hope that you post the link in there.
Yes. Or if you want to search Eventbrite and get your RSVP in early to make sure you get a seat, you can search for the name of the event on Eventbrite and make sure you get that important seat. This is an important conversation. We need to know the experience of refugees, no matter what part of the world they're from. This is something that happens far too often, in my opinion, that people get pushed out of their homes because of events they cannot control. It's fortunate when we can have systems in place to help people, but too many people are currently languishing in refugee camps right now as we speak. So I would encourage our leaders to find ways to get people back to living a real life and get them outside of these camps. So last thing for both of you, I always like to ask my guests, what is the one thought you would like the audience to take away today? And how could they get in touch with you if they wanted to ask you some more questions or learn more about this event or the Hmong experience? So let's start with Nou.
Yeah, the way to contact me will probably be through my LinkedIn. You can search for my name on LinkedIn and send me a message. The one thought I take away is, this is a really important event. We don't hold events like this very often in the DC area. So I would encourage everyone to register and sign up and come and listen and celebrate our communities with us.
Great, thank you. And KaYing, what's your closing thought and how could we get in touch with you?
Yes, I think similarly, please contact me through LinkedIn. Why I've been saying that the event has been much more internal facing. I think it's also an event to elevate the voices and stories of Southeast Asian American communities, which I know is not available enough. And it is also our way to honor the strength and contributions of those who rebuilt their lives in the US, like Nou's parents, my parents, and ourselves, right? And then to inspire future generations through a deeper understanding of this history. And that future generation is not only Southeast Asians, but other American young people who needs to know about the power, but also the harm that US policy, foreign policy has around the world, and how as American, we can do a better job of welcoming refugees and immigrants to this country and creating systems and institutions that are welcoming and helping communities to thrive. And so that's my last word here.
That's great. And how can we get in touch?
LinkedIn, KaYing.
LinkedIn, like LinkedIn. Okay, yes. Great. Well, check out LinkedIn, connect with these two really amazing people who are doing a lot of work for not just their Hmong community, but for the whole country and people around the world. So I want to thank you both again for joining me this week.
Thank you for having us, Cecilia.
This has been great. And thank you for raising awareness and for being so honest about your own experiences. I really appreciate it. So that's it for this week. We have to go rogue for now. If you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your organization bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com. You can find this episode of the podcast featuring Nou and KaYing on our podcast page and catch up on our other episodes we've had this year. You can find out what's on my mind this week by checking out our blog on our blog page. And if you'd like to work together, check out our services page and let's have a conversation. Now, we just wrapped up our spring session for CAE education, but we're continuing our ethics course throughout the year. So check out our education page if you'd like to learn more about ethics and watch for announcements about our fall 2025 session. So that's it for now. On behalf of Nou, KaYing, and myself, we'll see you next time. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together. Thanks.